Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congressman Holtzman, you suggested that you think there's a prima facie case for impeachment of the President. Is that correct?
Well, I'm not allowed to say those last two words.
Prima facie
I get to say 14 of the 16 words, but the last two I can't say.
I feel like George Carlin's words or something.
Why don't we say high government, high administration officials, yes.
Would that include somebody who was considered to be not a member of the executive but a barnacle attached to the legislative branch?
Such as?
Such as the man who would succeed to the office of president if he got out of the...
Oh, I think you can do a twofer.
Yeah, they could be a twofer.
Mm-hmm.
But if that person was assigned to the legislative branch, could you impeach him? Is a person who's assigned to the legislative branch attached, as Mr. Addington has said the vice president is, would he then not be subject to impeachment?
No, I don't know what Mr. Addington says about that, but there's no question the vice president could be impeached.
But he'd have to be a member of the executive branch to be impeached, would he not?
I think there's some, maybe Mr. Fein knows this, but I think there's also some precedent for holding that members of the congressional branch can be impeached.
Yeah, the very first impeachment was against a senator, Senator William Blount of the Senate. As the standard has clearly been established that members of Congress can be impeached.
Thank you. I was trying to see if there was some method to their madness. We had General Mukasey before us this week, and he said that the vice president is obviously and definitely a member of the executive branch. In the previous week, Mr. Addington said, no, he's not, or he could be, and he went back to Katzenbach in 1961, some opinion, and suggested he was attached to the legislative branch, so he was neither. He wasn't really an executive, and of course the National Archives want him to classify papers. They're not part of the executive. So I guess there's not a method of their madness. They're just madness.
Right.
Well, it's very clear the vice president has claimed he stands in the shoes of the president when he claims immunity from suit. That he argued in the suit brought by Valerie Plame and Mr. Wilson following the disclosure that he was entitled, like the president, to absolute immunity. So he claimed he was an executive officer there. And obviously when he refused to respond to the request, I think it was by Mr. Berman's, I think it's Mr. Berman's.
Maybe Waxman.
Excuse me, Mr. Waxman's request for documentation of the statements he had made to the special prosecutor in the Valerie Plame investigation. It was executive privilege of the president that he claimed. Now, maybe that destroys their idea of a unitary executive, because now that sounds like a duumvirate under the Roman Empire, but I doubt whether they were thinking of that analogy.
Mr. Fein, when you did the research, I know, on General Gonzalez, did you feel like there was a prima facie case for some type of impeachment proceeding at that time?
Well, I think there needed to be more investigation of the facts as to whether or not during his testimony he had misled Congress as to what he knew about the reasons for the firing of the U.S. attorneys, communications he had had with the White House or otherwise. But certainly if that could be established, obstruction of a congressional investigation surely would rise to the standard of a high crime and misdemeanor.
Do you think it serves a good social purpose to go into impeachment, or do you think that, as Congressman Watt feels, that we should concentrate on the omissions on health care and education and other issues and environment that we've had over the last 6 years?
Well, my experience certainly, it depends upon what the allegations of impeachable offenses are. There can be bad impeachments and good ones. The one that preceded Nixon was a bad one against President Andrew Johnson. But my sense, having participated in from a different angle than Ms. Holtzman on the Nixon impeachment, that it was an enormously unifying exercise. I never felt prouder than an American when I saw Mr. Nixon leave the White House, because he said, if I do it, it's legal, and that wasn't our constitutional system. And it was President Ford who said our national nightmare was over after we got rid of President Nixon through an impeachment proceeding. Now, it certainly, if the impeachment would be interrupted because of time, then you would have to question whether that would be satisfactory, because it wouldn't be fair to have only half of an investigation and people's names being maligned because there wasn't an opportunity to hear everything. But my view of the institutional wrongdoing against the Constitution here isn't something that you need archaeological expeditions to discover. These are open and notorious. The President has openly stated, and on the record he's gone on public radio and television saying, I flouted the FISA law. He stated, I had a terrorist surveillance program and I didn't care what the law said. And he's had his own Attorney General say, if I'm gathering foreign intelligence, I don't have to obey anything Congress has done. That's simply a decision here. Is that an impeachable offense if the president says, I don't need to obey the laws that Congress has enacted? It's another version of the President Nixon. If the president does it, it's not illegal. And therefore, you don't need a prolonged investigation of facts. He's already conceded what he has done. The same kind of thing has come up with his claim that he has power to detain any U.S. citizen as an enemy combatant and put them in detention indefinitely without any customary accusation or charge. And that's not hypothetical. There's someone right now. His case is in the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. His name is Mr. El-Masri. He was plucked 5 years ago from his home. He was initially charged with crime, and then he's now being held as an enemy combatant. Those kinds of things are just a judgment. Does that satisfy our understanding of what executive power is? That can go very quickly, and I think that would be a very healthy debate.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.